Greetings and welcome to the game. Are we doing the game or nerd news?
That's a good question.
Greetings and welcome. No, my fucking microphone's over here. That doesn't help, does it?
I'm so gonna cut some of this stuff in.
Okay, great. Okay. Take three. Greetings and welcome to the game. I'm here with Amber, and she has just come back from a big old trip all the way to Utah. We're going to ask her all about this trip. She went to Dead Wars. Now, Dead Wars basically is the largest Dungeons and Dragons campaign event in history.
Testing sound. Does this sound better? Because I just realized I didn't even have my mic in front of me. So
you were laughing at me. Hello and welcome to another episode of the game. I'm here with Amber, who's just come back from Provo, Utah, where she was hanging out with some cool people at Dead Wars, which is a massive D&D event with 200 game masters and hundreds of players. So many tables, and I've seen pictures of this. It looks like complete madness. So we're going to talk to Amber and try and figure out what on earth happened, how it went, what did she learn, all that kind of fun stuff. So, let's get into this. How you doing, Amber?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, well, I've had things going on too, not quite as exciting as Dead Wars, but we had the recent Cancer Society Games Fair here in
Oh, fun. So we
ready.
were all doing stuff. See, Dungeon Studios, we're just doing stuff all over the world all the time.
Yeah, exactly. There you are. And I even saw, oddly enough, I looked into, Facebook at one point, and I saw this very strange image of a monitor sitting on a desk with my face on it. Like, what the hell?
No.
And this was apparently in Utah. I was like, whoa.
So funny. Yeah. We showed up like an extra day before, obviously, to set up our little booth. So let me backtrack a little bit. We have a couple episodes talking about this. Last year, when they did the very first world record breaking game,
Yeah.
I covered it on the game. And then we were able to interview Andy. That was our season 2 opening episode. So we'll put that all in the blah blahs, right? And he had invited us, Dungeon Studios, to say, hey, if you guys want to come to the event, we'll give you a table up close. You can report on the event. And we were like, yes, all of it. Yes. Then the planning started and we were like, what are we going to do here? What's the angle, right? So we said, okay, we're going to show up as nerd news so that we're going to cover it like a news station.
Right.
But then we also had the gaming table. And so we had to search out a DM who would run the game for us and players, because we don't have enough Dungeon Studios crew who could go to the event that could work and also play at the table. So we figured we'll let other people play. Luckily, we met Albert, and we have an episode with Albert, which again appears somewhere. What was great about Albert was he had the insight into last year. So that again kind of helped us figure like planning for attending. We were trying to figure out our setup, and one of the pieces of the setup was I thought it would be a great idea to have a computer screen on our desk and then have ads and information on all of what we produce, right, at Dungeon Studios. And it was about a 15-minute video that we looped over and over again. So it included the game, it included deception checks, it included tabletop cinema, it included nerd news, it included our Fables from the Forgotten. And then we also looped in an extra little thing that we did. We did a treasure hunt where we had 6 golden minis that we hid throughout the mall. And they were in very specific locations, shops that, the folks who were coming to the event, these are shops that they would most likely find interesting, the fantasy type shops.
Right.
So since we were there the night before, I took that time when no one was looking to hide all these little minis. And then in that looped video, we had information about the 6 minis, what they looked like, and, what happens if you find one. Having that monitor on our little desk was perfect. It was so great. I mean, traveling with a monitor, not easy.
Not fun.
But it was worth it.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that worked. I mean, the golden minis thing, that's genius. Are you planning to do it again next year, though? Are there going to be people who are going to go, yeah, I know where they were last time? Or,
The treasure hunt?
Yeah.
That's a good point. I think we should do it again because people seem to really enjoy it. I
Right.
think we might make some changes, obviously, the hiding places. And there were some things we were talking about. We only had 6 golden minis. So we
Right.
thought, are we only going to hide 3 on one day and 3 on the other day? Are we going to, if they keep turning it in, are we going to keep hiding them and we'll just
Right.
pull out like little bits of loot at a time? We hid 6 on the first day and 6 on the second day. They weren't always all found. So it was kind of a balancing act of how much loot are we giving out when people find them.
Were people good at finding them?
Actually, yes. I usually tried to hide like 1 or 2 that were fairly easy to find. And then
Right.
I hid about 3 that I knew were extremely difficult to find. And I think on average, we had about 4 found a day. There was like 2 at the end of each day that weren't found.
Were you surprised by any of the ones that were found?
No, to be honest, I was actually surprised that they weren't all found. Maybe it's just me, but when I know that there's a treasure hunt, oh man, I'm turning everything upside down. I'm going everywhere.
Like, sorry about your shop.
Yeah. Like, is
I
it
was
in the
gonna
toilet? Let me lift up this tank lid real quick,
I'm just going to tip this shelf over to see what's behind it. I see. Okay, that's very cool. So, what was the atmosphere like at the Dead Wars event?
Oh, well, so the day before, it was definitely this kind of anticipatory. It was all people that were setting up. We had a few people that were in the mall just kind of like, what's this? Like they didn't even know what it was for. And so we were kind of spreading the news for those people. So it was like a camaraderie kind of feeling the day before because we were all vendors or all people who were setting up and trying to make our space what we wanted it to be. We
Right.
met geek nights that night
Yeah.
and they were fantastic. They were so much fun to talk to. And we also met Rob from Viva La Dirt League that night.
Robert Hartley.
Yes, Robert Hartley. Thank you. Of course, I'm not exfoliating. That's not the right word.
You're not,
Expanding.
you're not exfoliating.
I'm not exfoliating on the camera, but I'm not expanding on who are the people I met. But it was just it was nice to just meet people, shake hands, and have a minute to kind of discuss like business or learn about each other without having all the players and DMs kind of in the mix. The
Right.
second day, it was kind of this nice like weird ramp up because we kind of got prepared the day before. On
Right.
day 1, there was about 500 people that participated on day 1 because it was a Friday, and I'm thinking maybe people had to work. Friday may not be the best day for the event.
And also,
Uh,
you had to travel to get there, didn't you? I mean, it wasn't just turn up and here we are. You had to. How far did you travel to get there, and what did you have to go through to get there?
Right. So I'm pretty sure we might have been the only vendors that were not from Utah. Like we
Oh,
had no
really?
connections. My only connection to
Wow.
Utah is that I have family in Utah, but
Okay.
otherwise I came from California. Josh and Sean came from Nevada. Mike came from Florida. People kept asking us, "Where in Utah are you based?" And I said, "Oh no, we're Discord based. We're all
From-
over the world based." And
Right.
we mentioned, New Zealand, Australia, Serbia. We have
Did,
people everywhere.
did the Dungeon Studios crew just stay in a hotel together, or did they go different places? Or
So we got an Airbnb and we just decided, we checked in first to make sure, like, is everybody okay staying in the same place? Nobody's worried about any inappropriateness or anything like that. We weren't worried about it. It was great. We saved money. We cooked
dirty old
breakfast. We
Josh.
cooked dinner. Huh?
Dirty old Josh.
Yeah, dirty Josh, dirty Mike. And it's just more comfortable, I think, to stay in an Airbnb. It feels like home,
Yeah.
and we're all still connected in the open living spaces.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. There was
Okay.
actually a moment I'm going to share with you. I did not post any of this video on any of our socials. We invested a lot in this trip. Aside from plane tickets and Airbnb, like we weren't paid to come to this event.
Yeah.
We also, invested in better equipment and sound, and because we're going to be in a mall full of people. Leave it to the sound producer guys to be so excited about this. I think it might have been like a $4,000 boom mic. I'm not entirely certain. I don't understand that side of the business, but they were
Right.
so excited that night before. We were going outside and we were just having fun recording, walking on gravel, running on gravel, jumping on gravel, running in
Right.
the street, and then sliding and skidding and then like hitting
Right.
pavement. Like we were doing all these stupid stunts in the
Oh,
street and just Foley work and just recording it. And it was so much fun.
awesome. Okay, so going back to the event itself, then I guess.
Right.
Okay, so what was your role during the whole process? Like, what did you have to coordinate everybody? Were you the one? You were the one interviewing people, mostly, from what I could see.
Right. But it was definitely like a collaborative effort as far as what we were doing when and who was doing what. So
Right.
my role, because I'm kind of the co-host here of Nerd News and the Game, I was kind of the face, the interviewer, the person in front of the camera. We had Josh and Mike and Sean, who were kind of the team that was following me. So we had, Sean was holding the boom mic, and then Mike was kind of the sound guy. He was checking, to make sure everything sounded good. And then we had Josh on the camera. So I had these three guys just like following me everywhere. It was kind of fun. But
Nice.
I think Josh and Mike did a lot of legwork, making connections. When they noticed certain people, they were like, oh, we got to get in touch with that person. Let's get them for an interview. There were a few that I pulled in as well. So it was definitely a joint effort of, we just need to talk to that guy. Let's get that guy. Here's the cool thing though. I hadn't finished talking about what everything felt like, right? On Friday,
Sorry.
it was,
Yes.
no,
Yes.
that's okay. But so Friday was 500 people in person. That doesn't count the online numbers. We're still waiting for official numbers. And then Saturday was over 1,000 people. So already we've broken last year's record, which was 1,200. This year we're at 1,500 in person, plus the online at least. During this entire process, on day one, we were approached by this candy shop owner. The candy shop is Good Vibes. Okay. We're going to be talking more about that in the future, folks. But this guy was very interested in what we were doing. And he said, I really would like to support you. And that's one thing, by the way, during day one and day two, any of the connections that we made with the other vendors that were there, the other celebrities and people that were participating in the event, almost everyone that we talked to, we were able to get an interview with. And let's talk later. Let's have you on the show, or let's do this, or let's do a collaboration or sponsorship. So there was a lot of that happening. This owner of Good Vibes, the candy, he said, not only do I want to see if we can do something Dungeon Studios labeled candy, and we can figure out how to like maybe call it like Beholder Eyes or something. It's all still pie in the sky right now, folks. So nothing's confirmed.
Right.
But he had a friend that had a studio in the mall. And so he said, do you need a place for your interviews that will be nice and quiet? This studio is soundproof. It had couches, it had lighting, it had speakers, it had everything. And he just basically said, if you want to use it, feel free. And we just fell into our laps. It was fantastic because the mall was really loud and it was really hard to find a spot to get away to do a good interview without all that sound.
And that must have just made it look so good and sound so much better.
I really hope so. Y'all will see the finished product because we did a lot of 15-minute interviews. So those are going to start rolling out as we get all that together.
And such a good thing for networking too, like meeting people and then taking them to a little studio and being like, yes, this is our studio here at the location.
Right. But
no, it didn't just fall into our lap. This was part of our organization. We already had this.
That was really, I think, the takeaway from the entire event was that every single person in this space was supportive of everyone else, and we just wanted to help everyone. It was so great.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with a community like D&D, and it's relatively small compared to like video game communities or anybody else. Really, it's quite a small community overall. I mean, there are smaller communities. You do kind of have to stick together. It does make a difference, networking and cooperating like that. We're not in competition. We need to support each other because the bigger the industry gets, the better it is for everyone. That's the thing to keep in mind, I think.
What is the phrase? The rising tide rises all ships, something like that.
Something like that. That sounds good. I like it. Yes. The Dead Wars campaign seems to be the central element here. Can you tell me about the main storyline or the theme of this year's scenario?
I'm going to go back to last year's first, because last year was basically this siege on Vecna. Now, last year was a one-day event. So that was 1,200 people playing in a one-day event, fighting against Vecna. At one point in last year's game, it was almost like a TPK. It would have been like the largest TPK. It was getting bad. And Andy last minute was like, we need to do something to help them. And so they threw in this goddess, which unfortunately the name escapes me, but this goddess showed up, kind of helped to save the day a little bit. But in doing so, she was killed. And so this year's event, the plot is that there's this vacuum of power, and there are these two individuals who are brothers. They are not gods, but they are attempting to fill this vacuum and become a god. One is kind of this dark prince. His name is Skodos. And so he's kind of, very dark with these horns. We have footage of this. It's great. And then the divine guy, or the light side, was Eos. And so these two brothers, they're twin brothers. But even though Eos is labeled as the light, the Lord of Light, or, the good god, he really isn't. He actually has they were both bad. They both have different motives. It's just that he labels himself, but I'm benevolent, So day one, you're fighting the forces of the Dark Prince. By the end of day one, you determine what happens with the Dark Prince. Day two, you're fighting Eos, and you determine what happens with Eos. Now, when we talked with Andy, because I was so curious, I don't quite understand how you're going to end this, because you're playing 2 days, and supposedly these battles are happening simultaneously. Right. And then you have to somehow wrap it up on the end of day two and tell everybody what happened. And he said, here's the thing. I made sure that they both could live, but they both could die, or maybe one survives and they fill the vacuum. So we'll just have to see what happens. But those were kind of the options of the results. Right. That was the premise of the game. In the mall, here's the other thing that I really love. You have tables spread across an entire mall. I mean, in some cases, depending on where you're sitting, you can't see the main stage. You can't even see some of the other tables, because there's offshoot alleys in the mall, and there's tables there. Instead of having, let's say, 200 tables playing little siloed games, they also introduce runners. So those are people who are relaying information back and forth from the tables to the stage, because on the stage there's a main table, and that's where the head DM is, that's running the entire event. Aside from that, they had an actor dressed as Eos or dressed as Skodos, and he would go around and just randomly approach a table and be like, yeah, that spot on the map there, that is now silenced. Who needs health right now? Who's the lowest on health? You? Okay, I will give you a potion. He waits for them to drink it, and he goes, oh no, it was a potion of necrotic something, and now they've got he's just there to throw chaos in the mix. Right. And it connects the tables in a way, because they are all experiencing that. So they're all feeling like they're getting the same experience. They had other characters in the lore that were going back and forth, just randomly doing things to tables. It was great. Right.
Do they have any sort of unique rules or mechanics that they had to introduce to sort of help maintain this overall massive storyline?
Actually, no, that's the thing. He actually wrote this campaign almost agnostic of any kind of, you didn't have to play it as D&D 5e. You could play it as Pathfinder. You could play it as just about anything. I think he even provided Pathfinder instructions just in case. He wrote it in such a way that you could convert it to just about any game system you wanted and still be a part of the game.
Right. Interesting.
So now that I think about that, folks, when I think in a lot of my videos, I said the largest D&D game in the world, it's really the largest tabletop game in the world.
Right. So that's interesting, isn't it? So it's not just D&D. That's fascinating.
Right. I actually asked him, though, how many folks did decide to play it as not D&D? We don't necessarily have a lot of those hard numbers, but he probably said there was about 5 tables that he knew for sure.
Right. So it would have been very much the minority that were not playing D&D.
D&D, right.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously the most common game out there. So what was it like interacting with such an enormous amount of people that were in the D&D scene? You very rarely come across that many people who are all into it, Right.
I mean, aside from going to a Renaissance fair, which is kind of what it felt like, it was like an indoor Renaissance fair during the early hours, because the mall is open from 9 a.m. And even though the game itself was going from 4 to 8, they had all kinds of other activities throughout the day leading up to it. So there were musicians. And they had interviews on stage, and they had demonstrations of certain things on stage. And so it kind of just felt like this really great indoor Renaissance fair.
Was there a lot of cosplay and costumes and stuff as well?
Tons of cosplay. And I'm going to give a big shout out to the Geek Nights right now because their table was right across from us. Don't quote me, folks, but there was at least one guy there who had full on orc makeup with prosthetics, and it looked like movie quality. It was so good. He even showed up the second day with the same makeup on. And I was like, oh my God, you did it again. And he goes, no, this is still from yesterday. I don't know if he slept with it on.
You sleep in that?
Yeah, I guess. And then they also had out like a couple mannequins, and they had illithid, with the tentacles. And I took pictures with them, and they were so good. It looked like I was standing next to a real person.
Wow.
It was just a mannequin.
Right. Did the whole experience affect the way that you look at role-playing games or the way that you will run games in the future?
Yes, actually, it has a bit. We've talked a lot about, as a DM, you have to kind of be okay with changing your plan and improving, especially if you want to make the players feel like their decisions are affecting the story, right? When you're running a game for 1,000 people, let's say, there's got to be way more shenanigans and way many more things that feel like they're out of your hands. And they did actually have to adjust on day one there, because here's the thing. So they have these objectives. I think, let's say 3 objectives, 3 acts, right? So in the first act, there's some objective that every table has. And then the runners will go and figure out, did you pass or fail? Did you pass or fail? And they'll tally up the pass or fails. And then the celebrities and the folks that were brought in, they're the captains. And those decisions go up to the captains, or the results go up to the captains. And then the captains will be on stage play acting kind of the results of what happened. So for example, there was one situation where the DMs were told to basically get up and go away from the table because each set of players now has a decision to make. And I don't know exactly if it was different for every table, but one table was like, we have to decide if we're going to split the party or not split the party. And I think there was another table that was like, we have to figure out how to take down this airship. So every table had certain decisions they had to make. And then that rolled up to the DMs, which rolled up to the runners, which rolled up to the captains. And then the captains did this short little 10-minute skit to explain to everyone what their crew has decided. Are we taking down the airship? We're going to take down the airship. Yes. But how are we going to take down the airship? And then the next captain goes, well, we're going to take down the airship by shooting our cannons and da 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 da. Oh, well, I think that, my vanguard thinks that we should do it this way. And so they're play acting the decisions that everyone else made. Now, what I found interesting was having to pivot on a moment when the players do something unexpected. Apparently, the DM on day one had to make a quick decision. And he asked Andy, like, is it okay if we do this? Because I honestly think that the way this is headed, this is what's going to happen. And so they literally had 20 minutes to change everything about what they thought they were going to do. And the play actors had to come up with something like in 20 minutes, and they figured it out. So I just think, if anything, that emphasizes to me, because the crowd went wild when it happened, and they have no idea that was a pivot in the DM's plans, right? So that just emphasized to me how important it is. And I feel like I want to be even more aware of when I'm trying to pigeonhole my players into something. I would much rather sit back and change my plans. And I know we've talked about that a lot, but so maybe this isn't a change. This is more of a focus. Right.
Maybe. Yeah. Right. It's sort of where it's part of your own sort of, it's a catalyzing moment, perhaps. Right. Yeah. Very interesting. So, what are you looking forward to about next year's Dead Wars?
Oh boy. Well, I hope with next year, we still want to have a table to play. I hope we're still up close, up front and center with the action. I think what I would like by next year is that we have a bigger table and we have more Dungeon Studios products to actually sell, like physical products that we can have on hand. We did have, like, apparently Josh, our CEO, is like a huge comic fan. So he brought this tote full of comic books, and they were really good. Like, these aren't your everyday comic books. These were going way back. I don't know. I'm not a comic person, but they were good ones.
Collectibles.
People were coming up for sure and being so interested with that. And we had nothing else to sell, really, other than ourselves.
Well, that's a good thing to sell. But
Yeah.
yeah, you didn't mention anything about bringing me to next year's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we should. We should definitely. You should.
We're just gonna have to save up, something
You
like
know what? Just catch a flight with Rob.
right. Yeah, right. Robert Hartley. Yeah, of course. That's a great idea.
Yeah, why not?
Like, you're gonna sit next to me on a plane for 12 hours plus and then another flight from LA to Utah. Uh-huh.
I think the other thing too, that if we do this again next year, it would be good to have a larger crew with us, because we were definitely a skeleton crew and we had only the minimum number of people with us. So if it was time for a bathroom break, like then that shuts down everything for everyone, and then we had to eat lunch. And so I both days I
Right.
was running from the time I got up to the time we passed out at around like midnight or 1 a.m. And I only got time to myself when it came to bathroom breaks, and I had 15 minutes to eat, and that was it. Otherwise, we were running around.
No, I can sympathize. I that sounds very exhausting.
It really was.
Well, something else I was going to ask you. Right, that how much sort of access did you have to the organizers and to the plot and how the DMs were developing it and what have you? I mean, were you in the same boat as the rest of the players, or did you have a more kind of insight into the backstage, behind the scenes?
Okay, so as far as the plot goes, so they had packets available on We Geek Together site for the DMs and for the players with all the information they would need for the day. Okay, actually, I have one here that I snagged from our DM. So I don't know if you can see how thick this is.
Yeah, yeah, that's like 30 pages or something.
Oh, I feel like it's more than that.
Is it maybe
It feels like it's got to be at least 50 pages.
really?
But this is just one day. This is everything that the DM needs to know, but also they provided like maps for the DM so they wouldn't have to. Could you not see that?
Let's bring it down a little. There we go. Yep.
Yeah. So they in here is not only just information, it's all the everything that the DM would need. So they wouldn't have to provide a map or provide minis or anything if they didn't have it, right?
Right.
Make it easily accessible. So there's
Right.
actually some maps and stuff in here too. But
Cool.
this is all the information. Now I did not have time to go through this. I
Right.
mean, it was available before the event and I could have taken time, but I didn't. So a lot of the minutia of the day for the DMs and the players, I really didn't know about. I was learning as it happened. I'd be like, "Oh, something's happening over here. Let's run over there and find out what's happening."
Right. Well, it's kind of exciting though.
It was. As far as access, Andy was fantastic. He gave us basically like press badges. So we had full access. We looked official. People did not question us if we're like, hey, can we talk to you about this? Or can we pull you aside for this? Do you have time? Like we were able to get into back rooms and hidden areas that no one
Ooh.
else would have been able to get to.
Right.
We could, I mean, aside from being on the stage, we could be anywhere that we wanted to be.
Right. That's very cool. Were you? I'm guessing there were other TV crews wandering around as well.
Yeah. So we had hoped that maybe we were going to be like the exclusive coverage for the event. It turned out, and it's probably smart on Andy's part because we are a skeleton crew, but he paid for a very good media crew to come in. And so they had way many more fancy cameras and sound equipment than we had. Considering how small of a business we are, I think we
Yeah.
still look
Right.
pretty official.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yes, and they were very friendly too because we were trying to get coverage of the stage whenever main stage stuff was happening, but with all the sound, like there were speakers.
They're going to be recording it for their own site, so make sure you check out both Dungeon Studios, Nerd News, and Geek Night.
It just reverberated everywhere, so the sound quality was pretty bad when we were recording.
Right.
But basically Andy said any of that footage, like we'll get that to you, all the sound. So
Right.
any
Yeah.
of the stage stuff we ended up not having to really capture because it was getting captured by a really great media company.
Right. There you go. Yeah. I mean, I noticed that there was. I was doing a little bit of looking around online to see what I could dig up on the whole event, and there were at least 3 different streams that were like 10 hours long
Oh wow.
of the event. I mean, they looked like they were of the main stage. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're obviously streaming a lot of it. You mentioned that there were online players. How did that work into this whole thing?
Right. Because he wanted this to be able to be the largest tabletop experience in the world, he opened up an online component. And that online component, it's a different adventure, but part of the same adventure. So the folks playing in person, we're fighting against these two lords of light and darkness.
Right.
The folks that were playing online, they're doing a supply run to supply the folks that are playing in this game in person. So he labeled it as Hunger Games, the sponsors for the combatants. They would send in like a healing potion if that person needed a healing potion,
Right.
So we at Dungeon Studios had our crew play online the same time that our players in person were playing. So they streamed it. Now, what was really great is, and I hadn't thought of it, this is why I love that we were so collaborative with our efforts during the event. But Josh thought, you know what? They have Skodos, the dark god, going around to tables, messing with the tables. Why doesn't he mess with our online table? So he pulled him aside, brought him to the studio and said, hey, I'm going to patch you into our Discord. Do whatever you do with the tables, but do it for our online folks. And so he patched him in. And I don't know exactly what he did, but he did something to mess with them while they were fighting. And then he was like, okay, and I transport out of here. He also brought in Robert Hartley and said, hey, okay, I'm going to patch you into our Discord. Go ahead and mess with our players. I give you full permission, kind of a thing. But by the time we got Robert Hartley to do it, they had finished the adventure. So once those adventures are finished, the players that are playing online take screenshots and they send them into the dungeon or the We Geek Together Discord server. Right. And then that gets fed somehow to someone who sees it, and then they send supplies to the table.
Right. It was the We Geek Together YouTube channel that was streaming that did like 12-hour sessions.
Right.
That I saw online. I didn't watch them.
Yeah, right. That's a lot of, that's an investment to sit and watch that.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's pretty cool that it was all over the world in that respect. Everyone could see it. And that's an interesting phenomena that has kind of taken over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What other questions have I got for you? Well, what are your most memorable experiences? I mean, if you think about it, like one thing, top of your
well, see, here's the thing is I have a memorable experience that may not be the same as the rest of the crew.
Right.
We pulled aside so many people for interviews. We pulled aside Robert Hartley, Brian from Geek Nights. We had Johnny Stanton. He's a football player. He was there. Yeah, he was actually one of the generals on stage. Or yeah, they're generals, I think. We had a talk with him. We had Dax Levine. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody. We had an interview with Andy. We had an interview with the actor who was playing both Skodos and Eos. Gosh, sorry if I forget anybody. Huh?
One actor played both those characters?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So they send me, it's time for Dax's interview. They said, Amber, we're going to set up the stuff. Go get Dax. I said, okay. So I go to Dax's booth and I said, hey, we're ready for your interview. Okay, great. And so we're walking and talking, and somehow the topic comes up that, I'm a writer, and he's like, oh, what have you written? And I explain about my published story and then how I got accepted. I got the scholarship for the writing retreat. And he goes, oh, really? What writing retreat? So I explain it. Well, guess what? Dax is tangentially part of the Writing Excuses crew somehow, or he's associated with them, affiliated with them. And he knows Dan Wells, who is a huge author in that space. And so all of a sudden, the conversation goes from like da 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 to, oh my gosh, and we're geeking out over each other because he's like, you got the scholarship, and I'm like, you know Dan Wells, and and so we're just all of a sudden so excited about each other. Wow. We get to the studio, and it's like we can't stop talking. We're just having this wonderful conversation, and the guys are so confused. They're like, who's Dan Wells? What is this? Like, what are they talking about? Because it's all writing related. It's not tabletop, and so we've had to stop talking. We had to do the interview. It was great. It was a great interview, but we just wanted to keep talking with each other. So after the interview was done, we go back to our conversation, and he said, well, you know what you have to do now? You have to go back to my booth and buy some dice. And I'm like, yeah, I really do. And he's like, oh no, I was just joking. You don't have to feel obligated. I said, no. This is what I do. When I have experiences like this, I always buy dice to commemorate it. So yes, let me go to your booth and buy some dice. So I go to his booth, and his booth has like gemstone dice, and they're beautiful. And I kind of start poking around, and I see this amber this frosted amber set of dice. I'm going to pull them out real quick. This frosted amber set of dice. And I'm like, well, they're amber. I
Amber
have
for
to
amber.
get them.
Wow.
And they're so gorgeous. But here, I'm going to do the thing that he did. So of course, I buy these dice and then I start my little stream on my channel to share with everybody what I did.
Yeah.
And as I'm on my channel, he basically jumps in and does stuff in my video while I'm recording, and he pulls out his phone. Let me see if I can do this. And because it's gemstone,
right,
like it just glows.
Wow.
And so he did that while I was on my stream, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking
That's
out.
so cool.
So anyway, by the time I get done over there, we've just become best friends. And he's like, can I friend request you? And I thought he was joking, but he really did. So we've just been talking ever since. And he wants me to, we're talking about all these things that he does because he's a professional DM, but he's also a writer. And with writing excuses, he has all these other things that they do. They do a cruise that's just tabletop, the entire cruise. And if you're not playing tabletop, you can go enjoy the beaches of Mexico or something. Like there's a haunted house thing that they do with D&D. And anyway, so he's trying to get me to come along, and I'm for it, folks. I want to so bad. If I can afford to make this my day job, so I can quit my day job and then I can go do all those things.
Yeah, right. Totally. That's
so
awesome.
That for me was the highlight experience. I think overall, though, the entire team really enjoyed meeting Robert Hartley and getting to hang out with, because Rob, he was so kind. Here's the thing I'm going to tell you, folks. He probably won't tell you, or maybe he will. But because he was kind of one of the special guests of the event, I don't think he really had to do any more than that, be a special guest. And yet the night before, he was there longer than we were there. He was there from the time the mall opened to the time the mall closed. He was setting up tables, setting up tablecloths, putting chairs away. Like he was acting as if he was a hired like worker, labor, it was just so wow. Good on him for sure.
Really nice guy. I ran a game at a place called Spookers here in New Zealand, and he and his crew from his D&D stream turned up, and he was just so nice. I had no idea who he was at the time.
Yeah.
I was quite mean to them. And then afterwards I realized what was going on, and I was like, oh my god, I met Robert Hartley. And but yeah, we had a couple of conversations. But yes, I mean, he's one of the people I've been saying we should interview.
Yes. Well, I think now that we've finally made kind of a face-to-face connection, I think that definitely can happen. So we'll just have to work on that.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So you got anything else about the whole scenario that we haven't covered at this point? What other?
Yeah, let me look here, because I took some notes of things I wanted to make sure we didn't forget. Aside from the fact that, folks, all the interviews that we got were so fantastic. I can't wait to share them with you. My mom came to surprise me. That's not interesting to anybody else, but man, was it?
Oh, that's great.
It was so cool to she just showed up.
And we're live. Yo, yeah, we're live. I got her. I got a surprise visit.
And we were crying in the middle of everything. And I'm like, I just touched up my makeup after the interview. Yeah, let's see here.
Because you're saying your mom lives in Utah. You were talking about family living there. So I'm
right. Well, technically she's my mother-in-law, but she's more my mom than my husband's mom. Like they've pretty much told me that if we divorce, like they're going to keep me. And
right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
There's one funny thing. We were trying to cover, aside from interviews, right? We did a lot of walking and talking through the mall, like the way newscasters do, pointing things out. We got interviews with some of the players and the DMs to see how things were going at their table. We went into the We Geek Together store, and there was a tavern in the back where they had mead. So we kind of tried to do this, like, I don't know if it was a commercial or a skit or what, but it was called Night Raven Beverage Company. And me and Mike were supposed to walk up and just be like regular people, like, oh, what is this? You have mead? Well, can we try some mead? Sure. And I'll try this flavor and I'll try this flavor, and we'll cheers and be like, delicious. And then Night Raven Beverage Company. Like we were going to do this thing. It was great. Right. Well, because of the skeleton crew that we had, no one was manning the sound because Mike is with me. Right. So apparently we did. It was so good because I started and I told myself the name, Night Raven Beverage Company. I told it to myself like 20 times so I wouldn't forget it. Right. As soon as they go live, I'm like, we're here at, And then Mike just pops in right behind me and he goes, Night Raven Beverage Company. And we just start laughing so hard. And so we continue on. We get the taste test, da, 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 da. And every time we had to say Night Raven Beverage Company, I would just hear in headlights and he would go, Night Raven Beverage Company. And so it was fantastic. And then guess what? The sound didn't record. And so we had to do it again. And at that point, Mike was a little frustrated. So he was like, Amber, you're doing it. I got to man the sound. And so it just wasn't as funny when I did it by myself. So I told him we have to find a way to like cut that video in and then just redo the sound, like have him just do the voice work.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can reconstruct the sound. Movies do it all the time.
Right. So there was Night Raven Beverage Company, and then there was Spark Mocktails, and they made like their own special drink, mocktails for the event. So we got to do the same thing with them, but nothing quite as spectacular happened like it did with the other one.
Wow, sounds like a mental time.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, just so energizing, so good for us as far as a company and having the connections that we made. And
did our subscriber count go up?
I don't know. I'll have to look at the numbers. I'm sure Josh knows. But here's the thing. I didn't go to this event as Purdy Nerdy. And I wish that I'd thought to bring some of my cards or stickers. But even though I had no Purdy Nerdy shirt, I had nothing identifying me as Purdy Nerdy. So the only way people found me was through conversation. And my subscriber count ticked up even just by that. So I can imagine that Dungeon Studios, our subscriber count had to have kicked up.
Right. Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I know working for Questbook, I have the same issue. It's like you go wearing a Questbook t-shirt or something and I really want to give out my stuff, but I can't.
Yeah. So folks, for anyone who's interested in like sponsorships or any kind of collaborations, we've decided that Dungeon Studios, not only do we have like all the shows that are under our banner, but we're kind of making this a bigger package by adding Michael's podcast, Michael and Jeremy Steal Your Podcast. We've got my channel, which also has this crossover to writing and world building. We're kind of making it a package deal when we tell people, like, if you give us a sponsorship, you're not just getting Dungeon Studios, you're getting Michael's podcast is on radio once a week. So, and then there's the writing crew. So we could just keep rolling this up and add you in there somehow. You know, New Zealand folks, obviously look up Russell because we also have a professional DM under our banner. Sorry, one last thing. Folks, if you attended the event as a player, if you attended as a DM, if you were there to help out in any way and you were part of the event, Andy put out on his Discord a Dead Wars feedback form because he really was, he even asked me personally, he was actively looking for feedback because he wants to keep making this thing bigger and better. And what did we do wrong? What can we do better? So please, I'm going to put a link in the video. You can use that. If you attended in any way, provide the feedback because that can only make it better next year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Amber. It's very exciting to hear back from you about what went down and how much work you guys put into that. That must have been just, wow, what an experience. Have you been to anything like this before in your life?
Nothing like this. I mean, it had a convention feel, but I think it could get there with the more vendors that we get. Cause I mean, there were a good number, but
was that the difference between it being a convention and it being something else?
I think so. I mean, because here's the thing. At conventions, you have tons of vendor booths, and then you have some gaming tables. You have some area where people can game. It was the opposite. It's like all gaming tables, some vendors. But I think he's definitely interested in adding more vendors to the venues. So anything to make it bigger.
There's probably a balance to be had there. I mean, to be fair, I mean, you know, having so many vendors can be debilitating too if you've got too many of them, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. There could be I'm just assuming that there's probably a balance in there somewhere.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But you can probably provide that on your feedback form. Do you want more vendors or not?
Right. Exactly. And if anyone wants to, you know, throw a couple of $100,000 at me to get to America next year,
why not?
You know, that could be fun.
We can look into the donating miles further in advance this time around.
Right. There's an idea.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week, or we'll be back at some point, I imagine.
This is true.
Next episode of The Game. Over
Thank
and out.
you.